let's say I'm in class and we're talking about something that has to do with race. We're talking about Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King, slavery, the March on Washington. What other thing do they talk about in white schools? Those 5 things. And we're talking about one of those 5 things, and I raise my hand, and the teacher, more enthusiastically than they would do for any other student, goes, "Hannah, yes, please share about this." And I would be flooded and riddled with a bunch of emotions of just like, number one, I'm not who you think I am. Do you know who raises me? I'm not someone who should be speaking with authority on the Black experience. Number 2, I don't want to be the spokesperson for all things Black. Like, I have a perspective, but I don't want it to be the Black perspective. Also, I might have been raising my hand because I need to use the restroom. But now I have to answer your question. Hey, and welcome to another episode of Hey TRA. I'm your host, Hannah Matthews. If you are new to this series, Hey TRA is a YouTube series that I created for TRAs, or transracial adoptees. A transracial adoptee is someone who is adopted or fostered by a family whose race is different than their own. The purpose of this series is to help transracial adoptees navigate race and identity together. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking to you about my experiences as an adolescent TRA. And how I want to explain this to you is through the 3 main feelings or emotions I had during this season of my life. Disclaimer. I want to preface this episode by explaining that my adolescence experience was extremely hard. I'm going to be talking about primarily my experiences middle school to high school age, so approximately ages 12 to 18. And although the purpose of the series is to focus on my experiences of race and identity as a TRA, I want to be clear that my experiences don't happen in a racism vacuum. There are a number of experiences, things that happened to me, things that were said to me that impact my experience of adolescence. And so I want to tell TRAs and parents that each child is individual, and so my experience of adolescence may not be the experience your child has. However, I think it's important to know that I think the feelings that I'm going to be talking about are feelings that are often felt by TRAs during adolescence. I also want to give a trigger warning. I am going to be talking about sexual assault and sexual violence in this episode, and if that is something that is triggering to you for whatever reason, I wanted to give you a warning so you're not surprised or caught off guard by that in this episode. So enough disclaimers. It's about to get deep, y'all. So without any further ado, let's get to it. So the first emotion that I felt during adolescence was I felt inadequate. I told you it was gonna get deep. Y'all thought I was playing with you. I wasn't playing with you. I did not come to play with you. I came to educate. So the first feeling I had was I felt inadequate. And I want to give you some examples to explain why I felt that way, what I was feeling, what I was experiencing that made me feel like I wasn't good enough or like I didn't measure up. In my last episode, I talked to you about experiences I had as a young TRA youth, so my primary years. And I talked about lessons I learned about myself, about others, about the world, about race, about identity. And so what you're going to see in this episode now is that those lessons have been effectively internalized, and now I'm dealing with those repercussions. So, for example, lesson number 1 that I learned in the last episode was that I was Black. And although that is the truth, and it was, in my opinion, a good lesson that I learned, there's one thing that you do as an adolescent when you are different. At least I did this because I was different. I compared myself to my peers. And when I looked at them, I thought, what makes me different from them? Oh, I'm brown. So as a result, I often compared myself to the other girls in my class. Let's rewind, and I'm going to tell you a story that illustrates how I compared myself to others. So this story happens when I'm in 6th grade, and this was another lesson I learned. And I want to give you some context. So up until this point, I, like many other girls, had lots of crushes on little boys. And most of those little boys that I had crushes on were blue-eyed and blonde hair, having little white boys. And that was just because that's what was available to me. So I liked what everyone else liked. If you were cute, you know, I liked you. So I had a lot of crushes on those boys. And whenever I would express my interest or tell a friend to express my interest for me, I was always denied. And so I had internalized the lesson that white boys, because they always chose other white girls, they didn't like brown girls. So I had pretty much internalized that a white boy or man was never going to love me because I loved me romantically, because I had my father and my brother who loved me, but was never going to love me romantically because I was brown. So again, back to the 6th grade story. So I decide, after learning this lesson that white boys don't like me, I'm gonna just try. You know, we get a new kid in school, and he's black. He's moved into the town because, of course, he didn't live there. Because, let me just put up that demographic one time to remind you. He had just moved there, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try. I'm gonna give it a try. Maybe he'll like me, because, you know, we're both brown. So I decided to tell my friend, hey friend, can you give, let's call him Deshaun. His name is not Deshaun, but his name is equally black sounding. Hey friend, can you give Deshaun this note? And in the note it says something like, hey Deshaun, Hannah likes you, do you like her back? And the boy, you know, he straight curved me. He was like, I'm good, fam. So that was that. But the moral of the story is not that I learned that he wouldn't like me, but I want to illustrate something that happened. So when I had told my friends, hey, I want to, you know, I like Deshaun, they were all like, oh, Deshaun and Hannah, that would be great. You guys would be so cute together. Oh my gosh, yes. Now, those comments were never, ever stated with previous white crushes. So although Deshaun curved me and was not interested in your girl, I did feel like, in true racist fashion, we matched. So, you know, he wasn't the one, but another brown one will be. So, moral of the story, I was comparing myself to the other girls in my class, and the majority of those girls were white. So I left feeling ugly and not good enough from those experiences, and I associated that ugliness with my blackness. Another source of some of those feelings of inadequacy came from my ADHD. So although this is not race related, I think it's important to layer of what I was feeling. And if you couldn't tell already by the way that I talk and bop all around and blah, 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 I have ADHD. I was diagnosed with ADHD in 3rd grade. And so I think I was trying to think of an example of how that made me feel inadequate, but one of the main ways was, or one of the things I could think of to illustrate why I felt that way was the fact that I felt like I was always being compared to my brothers. Now, I know my mom never meant to make me feel any different or worse or inadequate, because of the way that my brothers performed at school, but she would often say things like, I know you tried really hard. I wish your brother would apply himself. If he tried really hard, he'd just be excellent. He doesn't even have to try, and he gets A's. Or school just comes easily to your brothers. It's just harder for you. And again, I know that these statements were said, I think my mom was trying to illustrate to me the fact that she understood that it was harder for me, but those statements made me feel like I wasn't measuring up to my brother's performance. Now, mind you, fast forward into the future, I'm the most educated person in my family. If somebody would have told little Hannah that she was going to do those things and be that educated, I would have never believed you. I had thought I was dumb. I thought that I would never be good at school. That wasn't my thing. And so I just kind of resigned to that thought that it was just going to be something that I was not very good at, and I would just be average for the rest of my life in terms of school. Another and final source of those feelings of inadequacy were the "you're not black enough" comments. And although these were few and far between, because it reminds you, there's like 6 of us in this whole town, so I'm not hearing it that often. In fact, I heard it more from white peers, the gumption, that I wasn't really black or not black enough. But when you're feeling already like you're not measuring up, you're not good enough, you're not meeting expectations, and then you have that on top of it, it's like, well, geesh, definitely never gonna be good enough. So again, the first feeling that I felt as an adolescent was I felt inadequate. Now, the second one is that I felt misunderstood. I talked about this in the first episode. I've probably talked about this in every episode, but it's one of the most palpable feelings I had as an adolescent was I just felt misunderstood. I remember hearing that thought in my head on repeat during the years of my high school, just like, no one understands me, no one understands me, no one understands me, no one understands me. I think the majority of these feelings of being misunderstood was that I was regularly experiencing racism, typically through microaggressions or through racial stress, and I had no one or nowhere to take those things to. I had and I have a lot of long-term friends. Most of my best friends, actually all of my best friends from primary school to high school, were white or white passing individuals. And so I didn't feel like I could go to them and tell them what I was experiencing or what I was feeling in a way where I was going to be heard and understood. And so I just didn't. And so during high school especially, I started to distance myself from those friends, which just made me feel even more and more misunderstood. I even still feel misunderstood from high school, that period of time, because honestly, if you were to ask somebody who went to high school with me, they probably would say I was a generally happy person. I was friendly, I was fun, I was nice, I was well liked, but that's not how I felt internally. Although that might have been what people saw, that's not how I felt. I didn't feel well liked or happy. I projected those things, number one, because I was a perfectionist and I didn't want anyone to see any of the flaws or challenges that I was feeling or experiencing. And number two, because I didn't feel comfortable enough to be vulnerable with people and tell them how I was really feeling on the inside. Another thing that made me feel understood, again, was that I was experiencing racial stress, especially in school. And so if you don't already know what racial stress is stress experienced as a result of racism. So it's stress you feel because you're experiencing racism, okay? An example of an experience that might have given me racial stress is, let's say I'm in class and we're talking about something that has to do with race. We're talking about Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King, slavery, the March on Washington. What other thing do they talk about in white schools? those 5 things. And we're talking about one of those 5 things, and I raised my hand, and the teacher, more enthusiastically than they would do for any other student, goes, Hannah, yes, please share about this. And I would be flooded and riddled with a bunch of emotions of just like, number one, I'm not who you think I am. Do you know who raises me? I'm not someone who should be speaking with authority on the Black experience. Number 2, I don't want to be the spokesperson for all things Black. Like, I have a perspective, but I don't want it to be the Black perspective. Also, I might have been raising my hand because I need to use the restroom. But now I have to answer your question. Another experience that might cause racial stress was through sports. So again, I grew up in a very, very, very white town with surrounding very white towns. And so if you were a Black athlete like I was, there was the expectation that you were the best at whatever sports you're about to do. Now remember, I was raised with the rest of these white people, so I am just as mediocre at sports as they are. But the expectation is that I'm about to go and run this 200-meter dash and beat everybody with like by 50 meters, okay? They don't know I'm about to get 6th place because I'm just average. So I would just feel the stress of the expectation that I'm about to just be the best, about to be the best dancer on the dance floor, about all that. It's like, don't put that on me, bro. Just don't put that on me. So yes, those experiences of racial stress made me feel misunderstood. It's like, you don't understand who I am. You think I'm this person and I'm not that person. And then yeah. And lastly, and kind of I think importantly, I didn't feel like my family understood me. I was experiencing these experiences, and if I did share them, which oftentimes I didn't, if I did share them, they couldn't relate. I mean, they would, maybe feel empathy or sympathy, but they couldn't relate. They couldn't give me advice. It was just like, I didn't feel, again, comfortable being vulnerable to share those things with them. And so I began distancing myself from my family in a lot of ways. I remember in a lot of ways, this led to me feeling very embarrassed and ashamed of my family. For example, I don't remember if we were out to eat, or I'm not sure if it was just me, my mom and my dad, or me, my mom, my dad, and my brothers, but I remember walking consciously, making a choice to walk at least 10 paces behind them. And that was in hopes that I would blend in and people would not stare at me and look like I'm a circus freak. It was just like, I just was feeling extremely misunderstood by my family, by the world, by my friends, by everyone. And so these feelings of being misunderstood led to my last emotion, and that is I felt lonely. I felt alone. Like, when I say alone, I mean alone. Just to make sure you're understanding me, adolescence, it's awful, okay? It was awful for me. I think it's awful for most. That's what my intuition tells me. And so, yeah, it was awful. It's awful for most people. But then you add on all of these feelings. So, number 1, feeling distant and separate from your family. Number 2, feeling like you have no true friends. Number 3, feeling ugly and feeling dumb. Number 4, having no love interests. Number 5, your 2 older brothers have left and gone on to college, so you're by yourself. Number 6, your mom gets a job because she's feeling the effects of an emptying nest. Number 7, you're looking for meaningful relationships and you can't seem to find them anywhere. Yeah, it sucked. I was so incredibly lonely. So incredibly lonely. And this loneliness paired with my crippling insecurity just led me to make a lot of unwise decisions. It made me extremely desperate for validation and attention, especially from young men. And I started to look for that attention and validation in dangerous ways. Because again, there were no brown men in my school, I started looking for love interests online and on the street. So a normal, healthy young lady, when she is catcalled at, because every young lady is, unfortunately, men do better. That normal, healthy, well-adjusted young lady who's secure in herself will hear that catcall and say probably nothing and continue to walk about her day. But not me. I was so deeply insecure and lonely that if someone were to catcall me, I would probably approach them and say, hi, how you doing? You know, blah, 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 blah. Because that's the level of what I thought I deserved from a man. I'll take attention in any way that I can get it. So I'm befriending young men I find on the street, young men that I find on the internet. I'm going to meet them all, like just going around meeting them, all kinds of mess. So long stories, extremely short, I do end up getting sexually assaulted by 3 different men on 3 different occasions. And so you might think, Hannah, that should have woke you up. Didn't you want to do better and protect yourself? But no, it made things much, much worse. I started engaging in a lot more risk-taking behaviors, drinking a lot of alcohol, smoking cigarettes, becoming promiscuous, all kinds of things. And it just further made myself feel unlovable, unworthy, ugly, dumb, all those things. It just confirmed those things for me. I just blamed myself for why those things happened to me. If I wasn't there, if I hadn't done this, if, you know, whatever. If I wasn't drinking. And of course, as someone who feels inadequate, alone, misunderstood, I didn't tell anyone. Why would I tell anyone? They wouldn't understand me. It was my fault. And I have no one to tell anyway. And I learned a final lesson, and that was that no man other than my dad or my brothers was ever going to love me or treat me with respect. And so therefore I just accepted that and treated myself however, you know, whatever. It didn't matter. I was absolutely depressed during this time. Absolutely depressed. I mean, I didn't want to come out of my room ever. I didn't want to have friends over. I didn't want to have friends. I remember feeling very angry. I remember saying things like, I hate people. I was just, it was a very hard time. But I do want to say that these feelings, the 3 feelings I talked about today, and the feelings I felt because of that experience, they all got better. They all got better. I know that's a catchphrase that another group uses, but it's the truth. For my TRAs, it gets better. If you are concerned about your adoptive child or foster child and some of the feelings that they're showing or behaviors that they're exhibiting, I want to encourage you to get them some help. You know? Ask them about what's going on. Don't just think, oh, she's an angsty teenager, she'll get over it, it's just a phase. Ask her what's going on. Ask him what's going on. Get them help if they need it. I think I would have benefited greatly from therapy at that time in my life. If you are a TRA and you've experienced something similar, anything that I talked about, if you experienced something similar, especially if you've experienced sexual violence of any kind, first I want to say, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor, but I can be a friend. And I will be a friend who tells you, it's not your fault, you're not alone, and I believe you. But I am going to encourage you to get professional help, because that's what helped me. I wasn't able to get that until I got to college, but I would encourage you to love yourself enough to get help. I know this one thing for certain. I am one effing resilient human being. And you, my fellow TRA, you are one too. Woo! Did you need tissues? I almost did. I almost did when I wrote it. I felt a little bit, you know, more brazen when reading it. But yes, that ish got deep. 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 Man, I swear that God just gets so deep. 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 That was for my Big Sean fans. Okay. I want to thank you so incredibly much for watching this episode. It was hard for me. Actually, it's really not hard for me anymore. I've learned that it's important that you're vulnerable. Hiding things is only hurting yourself. If you could not already tell, adolescence was a very dark period of my life. And I am excited in future episodes to tell you how it did get better. Things did turn around for me, and I'm looking forward to explaining to you how and when those things happened. Talking through these difficult experiences is a way that we can heal. You can't heal what you don't reveal, and emotions buried are buried alive. If you want to share with me anything that happened to you, feel free to comment. If you want to share with me privately, you can share with me at the Hey TRA page. That's _ Hey TRA on Instagram. I would love to hear from you. And in any way that you share, you are extremely brave for doing so. I love you. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to and hopefully learn from my experiences. If you have not already, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to my channel. I come up with new content every other Wednesday, so I look forward to seeing you in 2 Wednesdays on Hey TRA. I also want to say this took me 3 times filming to get this episode done. So it was a labor of love. I'm going to try and insert some bloopers from my previous shootings in this video for you. Make it a little bit lighter. Sheesh. Also, every other Wednesday. I'm sorry, my dog is walking in the background and making click, 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 click sounds. Sorry, I had to switch locations because everything in God's creation was being so loud around me. I'm not ready for this episode. I'm really not. Again, who has their air on? It is 65 degrees outside. Like, I just feel like I'm rambling. Being an adolescent is really cool. Stop moving. I'm trying to find a quiet space and I cannot find one. Ah! Some of this is good. Like, some of this stuff I'm talking about could be used. Yo, all these noises are killing me right now. Killing me. I think it's Jesus help me. Okay. I really need to flesh this out. So, peace. Yeah.